Havana, how to set up and play. First thing you'll do is put all of the cubes in the bag. You'll create a supply of money, a supply of workers. You'll shuffle all of the building tiles and deal 12 to the board, 2 rows of 6. The only thing you'll want to make sure is that these 4 end buildings, at least one of them is a value 1, 2, or 3 victory points. You'll also put 4 pesos and 3 random cubes drawn from the bag here in the center of the table. Each player will get 1 random cube drawn from the bag, 1 peso, and their set of 13 action cards. To start the game, all players are going to select 2 action cards from their hand and place them face down in front of them. When all players have chosen, we'll flip these over. Once all players flip over their card, you always rearrange the cards so the lower number is on the left, and this will now determine the turn order. So this player has a 4, this player has a 22, and this player has a 39. So you're going to go from lowest to highest. So this player will go first, then this player, then this player. If players are ever tied for their turn order number, you would break the tie by seeing which player had the lowest number of building victory points, then the fewest number of color cubes, fewest coins, fewest workers, and finally fewest gray cubes. Now in turn order, starting with the player with the lowest initiative number, players are going to get a chance now to execute both of their cards. They can execute these cards in any order. So they can execute this one, then this one, or vice versa. After they execute their cards, they have the opportunity to purchase as many buildings as they can afford, but they can only purchase the 4 outside buildings. So in this example, the siesta card doesn't give an action, but it allowed them to get a lower turn order number. For the worker, it allows them to take workers from the stock, and since they were the first one to play a worker during this round, they actually get to take 2. So now that this player has executed their action cards, they can now purchase buildings. So up here they can see if they'd like to purchase this one, they would simply take their red cube. Any cubes used to purchase buildings are now removed from the game, and the player would simply take this building and place it in front of them. Now it now gives them the ability to purchase this end building, this one, or this one. You can always only purchase the end buildings. This one only takes a worker, so they're going to take one of their workers, return it to the supply, and put this building in front of them. And that would complete their turn, and now we would go to the next player with the next lowest turn order number. When purchasing buildings, you can always substitute 5 coins for 1 worker. You can also substitute 5 of the gray rubble cubes for 1 of the 4 colored cubes in the game. Also, whenever a building row has been reduced to only 2 buildings because other players have been selecting buildings, these 2 will now move to the end, and we would fill in 4 new building tiles from the deck. Once all players have completed their turn for the round, we're now going to resupply the center of the table. You always add 3 pesos and 3 random cubes from the draw bag. Now players are going to decide which of their action cards they want to play for the next round. They would select one of their action cards from their hand, and they can discard either of the 2 cards they played in the prior round. Let's say they decide to discard this one. They would place that there. You're making this decision in the same turn order based on the numbers. So this player would decide this would stay face down. Then this player would decide, let's say they decide to get rid of this one. This would go to their discard piles. Discard piles can be face down. And then this player would decide. Let's say they decide to discard that one, and they place that. So players get to see based on the turn order, and then now simultaneously players will flip these over all at the same time, and just like usual, rearrange to have the lower number on the left, the higher number on the right, and these will be this player's 2 action cards for this round. Now after rearranging the numbers, turn order will now change. We can see this player now is 29. They're the lowest number. They're going to go first. Then it's going to be this player with a 47. And the third player this round will be this one with an 89. After all players have revealed and rearranged their cards, at this point, if a player only has 2 cards in their hand, it's at this point they can take their entire discard pile back into their hand. You now complete the steps of the round just like normal. In turn order, this player gets to execute both of their cards in any order they'd like. They get to purchase buildings that are on the end. Then it would be this player. Then it would be this player. And you continue to repeat that cycle. Just always remember at the end of the round, you're always replenishing and adding 3 pesos and 3 random cubes. And then players are selecting 1 action card to replace one of their 2, and the one they replace goes to the discard. The game will end immediately on a player's turn when they take a building that gives them the target number of victory points. In a 2-player game, it's the first player to get to 25 points. In this 3-player game, it would be the first player to get 20 victory points, and in a 4-player game, 15 victory points is the target. One other point before we cover each of the action cards, you'll see that some buildings require that the architect card has been played. So when a player plays the architect card, this now makes them eligible to purchase some of those buildings. They obviously have to pay the other building costs. And if the architect card is ever replaced at the end of the round, instead of going face down to the discard pile, it always stays in play face up. Now all of these cards can be returned to the player's hand, again, when they only have 2 cards after the reveal. Finally, let's cover all the action cards in the game and how they work. The siesta card doesn't provide any actions, but it does have a 0, so it allows players to get lower in the turn order sequence. The next one is refreshment. Most of the cards are mandatory. You have to take the action. Refreshment is one of the 2 optional cards. This allows you to return any 1 card from your discard pile back into your hand. So you can look through your face down discard pile, select the one you want, and now take it back into your hand. The next is protection. When the protection card is in front of you, you are now protected from tax collectors and thieves for this turn or this round. The debris card lets you take all the debris from the middle of the table. Debris are these gray cubes, so if this player played that card, they could take all of these cubes. The conservation card is the other optional card, so the player may immediately remove one of the end building tiles. It would go back to the game box. Also, once that's done, that can only happen once per round. So if 2 players in the same round both play the conservation card, once one player, remember you always follow turn order, once one player executes the conservation action, the other players that play the conservation card no longer have the option. The tax collector lets you immediately take 1 peso from the stock, and you're able to remove 1 worker or 1 piece of building material from each following player. 2 other points, the operative word there is remove. You don't get to take it. You get your 1 peso from the bank. You're just forcing other players to discard a worker or 1 piece of building material. It's your choice. Also keep in mind though that the protection card, if a player had this in front of them for this turn, they're protected from tax collectors and thieves. Next is the worker. This allows you to take workers from the stock. If you're the first player to play the worker card during the round, you actually get 2 workers from the stock. You don't necessarily have to be the first player in turn order as long as you're the first one to play a worker card. All subsequent players during that round that play the worker card would only get 1 worker from the stock. The architect lets you take 1 worker from the stock, and as we've talked about, the architect would stay in play, allowing you to purchase buildings that require the architect card. The pesos thief allows you to take half of a following player's pesos rounded down. So the player would have to be following you in turn order, and it has to be the following player. If you're the last player in the round and no one's following you, you can select any player to take half of their pesos. The materials thief works the same way. You would select a following player and take 1 of their building materials from that player. And if you were the last one, nobody's following you, you can select any player to take that building material. Also, if the player you select has more than 3 colored cubes, you can actually take 2 cubes from them. The black market allows you to take a cube from the bag. If you're the first person this round to play the black market, you get to take 2 pieces from the bag. All subsequent players that played the black market get to draw 1 piece from the bag. The pesos card lets you take half of the pesos from the middle of the table, but you get to round up. So you would go to the middle of the table. We can see it's 7. Half would be 3.5. Rounded up, this player would get 4 pesos from the middle of the table. And finally, Mama lets you take half of the debris cubes from the center of the table and half of any other building material. So in this example, there would be 3 gray, so they would get to take half, rounded up, so they would get 2 gray, and then they would get any other building material half. So since there's only 1, but we always round up, they could have their choice. So they could take half of the gray rounded up and half of one other rounded up. And that should be everything you need to set up and play Havana.